It was Friday morning, and I was already looking forward to leaving the office. It's not that inside sales work is boring, you know. Okay, she was, but she couldn't compete with golf or sex for that matter. In fact, if I had the choice, life would revolve around these hobbies. Well, that's the fantasy. I guess I should tell you a little about myself. I'm Scott Evans. I guess I'm just a regular guy, albeit short. I'm 5'6" and weigh about 170 pounds. With a 36 waist, I don't have a body that makes ladies melt, but I like to think they don't run from me in fear. I'm 48 years old, and I have mostly dark hair with just the right amount of gray. My eyes are probably my best physical feature. They are blue, but I have friends or family members who think they are gray. My wife is Lisa, and we have been married for 18 years. Lisa is 44 years old and still very attractive to me. She was and remains the woman that many men pay attention to, although not everyone. For me, she falls into there's something special about her category. Do you understand what I'm talking about? She's 5'7", and while she won't tell me her weight, I'm sure it's around 145 pounds. She's probably not considered skinny, but like I said, she's still attractive to me. I love watching the way her hips sway when she walks. She also has great legs. I consider myself something of an expert on women's legs after years of careful, if not entirely scientific, study. I'm guessing her hair is still mostly light brown. Although I haven't seen their real color in 3-4 years, she insists that her colorist use a color that matches her natural color, so I guess I trust her. Lisa and I were introduced when I first moved to this city and decided to look at an apartment in the complex that she then managed. She was attractive enough to get my attention, but not so much that I hesitated. This probably turned out to be my advantage because her personality very quickly began to compensate for everything necessary for her to give me the wow effect. And I was able to act quite confidently. I admit, it was a little easier because we already had something to talk about, which allowed us to get to know each other without any pressure. She was very friendly, as she should be when dealing with potential new tenants, but I don't think she was required to invite me for coffee after I signed the lease, which she did. Again, she could just be being nice, but I allowed myself to think that maybe she was interested. It was late in the afternoon when we finished with the paperwork, so she left 15 minutes early, and we went to continue talking and drink lattes. We had a great conversation. I found out that Lisa worked in retail for a few years after leaving school, but decided after a couple of years that she wanted to do more, so she went back to school and ended up getting a bachelor's degree in marketing. At the time, she still didn't know what she wanted to do as a career, but thought that marketing would give her the best chance in most types of businesses to pursue many different career opportunities. She definitely wanted to get out of retail. She enjoyed the job and interacting with clients, but hated having to work weekends and evenings. Although it was never considered, she noticed a posting on Monster for a leasing agent property manager position at a large apartment complex and became interested. She felt it was a more professional position that still gave her the opportunity to interact with clients, but also provided more normal work hours. By the time we met, she had already worked there for about 18 months and really enjoyed it. I told her my story. I graduated from a small private college in the Midwest at the age of 22 with a bachelor's degree in business administration. Like her, I didn't know enough about what I wanted out of a career while I was still studying to focus on what would make me more competitive. As a result, I went from one entry job to another for several years until I finally realized a few things about myself. First, I didn't like being responsible for other people's work results. I learned this while holding several junior management positions, such as night parking manager at a hotel in the city where I was then living. Second, while I enjoyed the competitive side of sales, the fact that I had to consciously force myself to smile, even when I was in a good mood, made it harder for me to develop quick relationships when meeting people in person for the first time. Obviously, this made it difficult to work in outside sales. Through considerable self-reflection and exploring several less than ideal career paths, I finally realized that inside sales was a good fit for me. I was still able to enjoy the competitive side of sales in general and use my good voice. However, I was not limited by aspects of my personality that might make outside sales more challenging. It was interesting. Around Lisa, I smiled very easily and without having to think about it. When I finally looked at my watch, we had spent several hours together. Lisa, I'm happy to continue the conversation for as long as you want, but I want to respect your time. Should we wrap up? I guess there's no need to say that we'll meet again very soon, right? I've always heard that ladies like confidence, so I thought, why not? You're pretty confident, aren't you, Scott? She said with a laugh. Okay, call me at the office when you're done moving things into your apartment, and maybe I'll bring pizza and beer, okay? I don't think we're close enough to need me to help you move anymore. I laughed and told her it was a deal. I walked her to her car and thought about the kiss. In the end, I decided not to create any awkward situations by being very proactive in my reluctance to kiss her or maybe try to kiss her. When I opened the door for her, I said, "I hope you enjoy our exciting conversation tonight. So many women only see me as a body, and it gets really tiring after a while." This turned out to be a great move because it made her laugh out loud as she got into the car. I later learned that she really appreciated my efforts to make this moment as easy as possible. I decided that for this time in my life, I would let things take their course. I was interested in seeing Lisa again and hoped that she was also interested in me. But I didn't let her occupy all my thoughts and especially my schedule since I was new in town and just starting a new job. I did a deep dive into all of our company's products and our competitors' products. We were an industrial supply company, so we had a lot of products, but none of them required much effort on my part. Our real product, from a sales perspective, was our service. Specifically, we managed our clients' inventory levels in such a way as to maximize either their inventory levels or their order volumes, depending on whether they benefited more from a slightly better price or from savings by keeping inventory levels as low as possible without risk of running out of important positions. I must have been one of the few people who came to realize what a real competitive advantage we had because I became our company's top salesman within about 18 months. But enough about work. I'm sure you're more interested in how the relationship with Lisa developed. As I hinted earlier, I was Mr. Cool with Lisa. I made a legitimate excuse to pop into the office in a couple of days and told her how much I enjoyed our conversation and that I would like to do it again but did not commit to anything specific. I wanted to make sure she was interested. About a week later, she stopped by my house right before leaving work on a Sunday afternoon to make sure I knew about the pool complex's mixer the following weekend. Then she could just call, and the whole complex was covered with posters advertising the mixer. I assumed that this was a sign that she was interested in further meetings. Thus began our relationship, which in many ways was a textbook example of how experts say a romantic relationship should begin. Although we were both clearly interested in each other on a romantic level, we took things slowly. Honestly, this teasing, so to speak, was fun. We saw each other once every couple of weeks. I was definitely looking forward to our next meeting and hoped she felt the same. We also talked on the phone once or twice a week. Most of the time we spent together could be described as very informal. We were both what you might call home buddies, although I hate that term. We had as much fun watching one of our favorite reality shows together as many would get from going out for a nice dinner and dancing. We understood my dry and sarcastic humor, which was an added bonus. As I mentioned earlier, we also had a great time without getting physical for quite a while in the beginning. Well, let's not get carried away. I would never want to go back to it, but it was cool at the time and for a while, and I always thought it defined us as a couple in some way. We had a sort of comment-switching game along the lines of the one I described earlier, in which I was so proud of being just a body. Gradually, our time together became more and more frequent until we were spending several evenings and/or lunches a week together. The fun we were having without progressing to physical intimacy, even though the chemistry definitely seemed there, began to feel almost awkward. I think we went on like this for so long that neither of us knew how to break the cycle. It ended one day when we took Lisa's dog, Sophie, to the dog park. No one was sure what breed Sophie was, but the popular description, Labrador mix, was often mentioned. We were walking back to the car from the fenced-in play area, and apparently I stepped on a loose rock or something and fell. Of course, being me, I made it as funny as possible. Lisa started laughing hysterically, and Sophie ran over and started licking my face, or in dog lover parlance, giving me kisses. This must be the first kiss you've gotten in months. Lisa exclaimed, laughing so hard that she almost burst into tears. Well, if I can't get it from you, then I guess I'll have to settle for what I get from Sophie. As soon as this comment came out of my mouth, I panicked. It came without hesitation, and Lisa could have responded to it in a variety of ways. I, of course, hoped for an answer in a light and humorous tone. I was definitely surprised by what she did next. She knelt down and then straddled me. She might have said something like, "I didn't know you were waiting for me, but I'm not sure." However, she immediately covered my mouth with hers and proceeded to give me the most passionate kiss I had ever experienced in my life. Remember, I was no longer a young man for whom a simple kiss would be erotic, and I immediately became aroused, and Lisa obviously noticed this since she began to rub against me. It was clear that we needed to get out of there quickly, as this was going to escalate quickly and go beyond what we could do in public without risking arrest. So we got up and went to her house, where we couldn't keep our lips off each other. Make your cliché about fireworks, chemistry, or whatever. The time we spent together the rest of that day, evening and night, was beyond anything I could adequately describe. As you might have guessed, our transition to a physical relationship was the catalyst that led us to being husband and wife in every way except the legal one. We were rarely apart unless one of us was working or I was playing golf. I even tried to get her to play golf with me, at least from time to time, but she was adamantly against it, citing it as my cave time. I was incredibly happy, and she made it clear that she was happy too. Although I didn't really feel the need to get married, I couldn't imagine ever wanting anyone else, so a few months later I proposed to her at the same time. The main character proposed on the current season of The Bachelor. It might not sound very romantic, but for us it was very. Well, our way. Lisa laughed until she cried. Or maybe it was the other way around, but as soon as she could catch her breath, she said, "Not that you don't know it anyway, but I think I have to give you an official yes." Of course, it made me very happy. As is often the case with marriages, ours was very fun and exciting at first, and then settled into a more pleasant and comfortable state. Lisa and I enjoyed many common interests, but we also each had our own passions. Of course, we thought about children, but somehow we never felt that the right moment had come. At first, we were enjoying each other too much to add anyone else into the mix. Then it was probably just a matter of inertia. We continued to have our realistic sex life. We went through a typical progression from more than twice a day to 4 times a week to several times a week. I was fine with that. I was already 46 years old, and my libido was no longer what it used to be. I still really enjoyed our intimate time together, but didn't need it all the time like I used to, and I think Lisa felt the same. We experimented with different positions, role plays, dirty talk, etc. At an early stage, it was fun to experiment with, but we found that the more basic positions and actions gave us just as much fun as those that might be considered more wild or exciting. About 2 years ago, Lisa began to change a little. It was so gradual and subtle that I didn't even notice it at the time. She became less interested in sex and rarely dressed at home in a way that would attract my attention. That was pretty normal after years of marriage, right? Interestingly, at the same time she began to dress even nicer for work. She almost always wore sexy heels, and although she used to wear skirts only occasionally, she now wore them almost all the time. I asked her about it, and she said that her role called for an edgier look. By then, she had been promoted to regional manager for her property management company and was highly regarded within her organization. As I mentioned earlier, Lisa became less interested in our sexual relationship, and I found that although my libido had declined in recent years, I still wanted more than I was getting. Over the past few months, I've started reading stories on Literatica to satisfy myself sexually. At the time, I was reading spanking stories where the sex was described in great detail, and any cheating was perceived as exciting by all involved. One day, while I was reading a story and just about to get down to business, something dawned on me about the story I was reading. It was told from a woman's point of view. The main name of the protagonist was Linda. She was from a city just a few hours away from us. She had been married to her husband, Steve, for 2 years less than Lisa and I. Linda was the CEO of a property management company, and Steve worked in sales support for an industrial equipment supply company. Linda was 5'9" and weighed 130 pounds with gorgeous dark hair and blue eyes. Steve was 5'5" and weighed 190 pounds with graying and thinning hair. You're starting to see where this is going, right? The gist of the story was that Steve was not satisfying Linda. You see, neither he nor I get any pleasure from insulting men in stories on Literatica, but that's just us. In any case, Linda, with all her generosity, loved Steve despite his poor equipment. Since this aroused Steve, however, she graciously agreed to pick up other men with great assets and bring them home to have sex with them on their bed while Steve was at work or fishing. Steve knew about it, but they never discussed it. Now call me paranoid if you want, but too much of this story was too much like us. I don't know if Lisa read Literatica and didn't really care. I don't know if she wrote the story or if one of her boyfriends wrote it. I decided to take sick leave and go to Radio Shack to buy all the voice-activated recorders and motion detector cameras. I thought these things only existed in literature, but it turns out they actually do exist. At least for the purposes of my story, it turns out we don't have a lot of places to hide things like this. But I eventually found enough places for microphones and cameras to feel like I had most of the critical areas covered. As you might imagine, it was difficult to act normal around Lisa for the next few days, but I tried. I would feel stupid if my suspicions were proven wrong. Even if they turned out to be untrue, however, recent events were proof enough that Lisa and I needed to have an honest conversation about the physical side of our relationship. Since I assumed too much, we definitely communicated very openly and honestly about everything else. And I expected her to tell me if there was something she didn't like about our relationship in the bedroom. Now that I think about it, I realize that I myself was not happy with the way things were and did not raise this issue with her. So we are back to the beginning of the story. I was looking forward to leaving the office at 3 p.m. this afternoon to go fishing. This was my first real chance to find out if I was just being paranoid or if the similarities in the above story were truly a coincidence. Finally, 3:00 p. came and I ran out the door like crazy. No wonder it was handicap day for me. I played 97, not the best round for a 13 handicap player, but who could blame me? I definitely wasn't thinking about golf. When I returned home, everything went as usual. She asked about my game. I said I played terribly. A real golfer never plays well, right? We continued in the same spirit, which, as I now realized, we had been maintaining for a couple of years. For my part, I could think of little other than checking my tracking devices. I finally got the chance to do it on Sunday afternoon when Lisa went to the mall. Or perhaps went to the mall. At that point, it didn't matter anymore. Yes, it was getting harder and harder to wait for proof rather than just confront her. Let's face it, what would happen if I did this, especially with only suspicions, right? She would either deny it or just tell me that I was right and that she wasn't sorry or interested in trying to fix the situation. Neither of these options seemed good to me. At least if I had some evidence, I could feel morally justified. Well, sometimes small victories are important too. Well, it turned out to be just as bad as my worst imagination, I'm afraid. I didn't know this guy, and frankly, I didn't care. Right, I know. I should have wanted to beat him up, but he didn't know me and didn't owe me anything. Lisa, on the other hand, owed me. Not much, of course. Just a little about giving up everyone else and a little respect. Two things really hurt me about what I saw and heard. First of all, the guy had more than me. Mine is just average at best, but I never knew Lisa had a problem with it. I guess I was naive to believe all that nonsense that good women sometimes say. It's not the size that matters, it's how you use it. Yes, that's right, or so it seems now. Plus, Lisa was very aggressive in her dirty talk with him. I can only compare how I felt at that moment to a time long ago when I lost my job and was completely overwhelmed, but this was 10 times worse. It was like life had been sucked out of me. I admit I sat down at the table and cried like a child. For a very long time, what should I do now? One thing was certain. I needed to leave to collect my thoughts. I couldn't face Lisa, and I certainly couldn't pretend that everything was fine between us. Damn, how could I even think that she was interested in everything being fine between us? Probably, even such a thought crossed my mind was arrogant. If she didn't care about being faithful to me, why should I think she cared enough about our shared future? Lisa, my time with Bill was enjoyable that afternoon. To be honest, the excitement was starting to fade, but Scott's small dignity didn't do much for me now that I was used to Bill's huge one. However, I was really looking forward to a nice evening with Scott, including dinner and maybe some cuddling. I don't know why, but Scott seemed a little depressed lately. He usually returned from golf around 7 p.m. And I started to worry when he still wasn't there by 8. He didn't leave a message, so I called him, but the phone was off. It was strange because he rarely turned off his phone. Not knowing what else to try, I went upstairs and noticed that many of Scott's things had disappeared from the top shelf of his dresser. I checked the bathroom and again noticed that many of his toiletries were missing. Concerned, I checked his closet and found that many of his things were missing. Now I was in a panic. That's when I noticed his wedding ring left on my dresser, seeming very lonely and quiet, but saying a lot. How could he know this? Now that I thought about it, it didn't even occur to me that he might find out or what might happen if he found out. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's true. Or perhaps more likely, I stopped thinking about such things or feeling guilty about what I did a long time ago. I remembered how it started with Bill. He was also married, but he showed great interest in me and it was so flattering. But never gave me a reason to look elsewhere for attention. But still, having someone new and different take an interest and be attracted to me was incredible. When he finally managed to convince me to sleep with him, I have to admit, it was better than anything I had ever experienced. I was always very happy with Scott, but as I mentioned, Bill was so much more. Over the past couple of years, I have to admit that I have lost interest in sex with Scott because of what I was getting from Bill. This realization also came to me only now. I left several voicemails for Scott, but it was obvious that he had no intention of calling me back. I had no way of knowing where he was or what he was doing. Will he file for divorce? If so, do I really care? Even though it was hardly my choice, I had to decide what I wanted. If I wanted to keep Scott, I needed to figure out how to get him interested in staying with me. Scott wasn't a man to shout and brawl, but this might put that to the test. I finally went to bed when it began to get light. I don't know if I slept at all. All I know is that this whole weekend was nothing more than a nightmare in which I felt a heavy lead ball in my stomach. Bill tried to call me a couple of times, but I ignored his calls. I returned to work on Monday, but carried out my duties like a dream, and Tuesday too, by the way. Finally, on Wednesday evening, Scott called. Scott, I guess you found out. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. Hell, I don't even know how you found out. Well, I think we've got one thing figured out. You're not sorry you did it. You're just sorry you got caught. That's not what I meant, Scott. I bet that's exactly what you meant. Tell me why you did it, what was missing in our relationship, and why I couldn't satisfy you in bed, Lisa. Then maybe we'll have something to talk about, if you're interested in talking at all. Do you prefer divorce? No. I mean, I can't honestly say that I can give you a good answer to any of these questions right now, except one. I definitely don't want a divorce, okay? Call me when and only when you can answer these questions. Then maybe we can figure out if we still have a we and what to do about it. Okay, Scott, I'll call and thank you for being willing to talk. I mean, Scott, as I mentioned, wasn't usually the type to fly into a rage, but I was still surprised at how calmly he took it. It seemed like we still had a chance. The conversation, of course, showed that I was woefully unprepared to answer difficult questions to which he had a right to know the answers. I decided to take the next day off so as not to be distracted by work issues and think about it all. My feelings were confused. I, of course, felt guilty, but for some reason, and I'm really embarrassed to admit this, I felt sorry for myself for getting caught and for potentially losing Bill. Trust me, I know this won't make anyone sympathetic, but since I got caught, I should be honest. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad and a cup of coffee. I thought about the questions Scott asked me. I think it took hours because I drank almost the entire pot of coffee, and then I smelled something burning. The residue at the bottom of the pot was so burnt that I would probably have to throw out the pot itself. In the end, I had to rely on Scott's love and forgiveness. The truth is that it simply happened because I liked the attention of someone else. I loved and appreciated Scott's attention and love, but I was used to it. Although he was not inferior sexually, the reality was that sex with him was no longer the same as it used to be for me. After gaining experience and even getting used to Bill's dignity, it spoiled me for the smaller Scott. I cried again when I thought about it. Scott didn't deserve this reality. I kept thinking about what to say to Scott the next day at work and over the weekend. I knew that if I didn't call soon, there would be no point in doing it. But if I didn't have good answers, then there would be no point in doing so. On Sunday afternoon, I finally called. I got to his voicemail and left a message saying I wanted to talk when he was ready. He called me back about an hour and a half later. Hi, Lisa. Scott, thanks for calling back. So are you ready to talk? I don't like some of my answers, but I'm as prepared as I can be. Then how about lunch tomorrow? Go through the drive-thru and get what you want, then meet me at the park. Okay, Scott, what time is it? 1,230 by the pond. See you there. He had already hung up. As I tried to sleep that night, I struggled with what I was going to say to Scott. I had to admit that I wanted to have both. If Bill had been single, might my opinion have changed? I probably will admit it. Sex with him was just so much better. However, it has become less exciting lately. I had to figure out why and what to do about it if I got the chance. By the time I fell asleep, I had a plan. It was a risky plan for sure, but at least it was something, and I think it was better than nothing. Perhaps it was Machiavellian for me. But the next day I wore Scott's favorite dress, a blue dress that slightly showed off the roundness of my breasts and a skirt that showed off the bottom of my thighs. I know you probably think I knew what I was doing, but you know, why are we in this situation in the first place? I think I've proven that I don't always think very clearly. At that moment, I decided that it wouldn't hurt. Scott looked reserved as he sat down next to me at 12:40 p.m. He was a few minutes late, but what could I say about that? I waited a minute and finally he spoke. Well, nothing like making a conversation comfortable, right? I know, I deserve it. Scott, I don't know where to start. First of all, you were the best husband anyone could ask for. I guess that makes everything even worse. I really can't think of anything you did or didn't do that would have led to this. I still don't know how you knew, and it probably doesn't matter, but I never meant to hurt you. Having said that, I have to admit that sex with Bill was good for me. I don't want you to suffer from this, but it's true. With you it was incredible in the beginning and very good for a long time. It's just better with Bill. It's certainly not an excuse. I know I don't want a divorce. I really love you, although that may be hard to believe after what you just heard. I love everything about our life together. I'm even happy with our sex life. It just doesn't excite or satisfy me the way the rest of our relationship does. I understand you probably won't want this, but could you consider staying together but allowing me to continue my relationship with Bill? My heart sank, waiting for an answer that seemed like an eternity. How stupid and selfish I was for asking this question. Finally, Scott answered, I have to admit I'm surprised. I thought you'd say you wanted a divorce if that's what you thought about our sex life. If I consider this, how can I be sure that you really love me? I was stunned. I didn't know what to expect, but this definitely wasn't it. I was completely unprepared to formulate anything articulate in response. I probably won't be able to give you a good answer to this other than to say that if you give me a chance, you will definitely feel loved and cherished. I hardly feel loved and dear right now, Lisa, but you probably don't care, do you? Although this comment was well-deserved, it was like a punch to the face and stomach at the same time, causing me to collapse to the floor. The tears came immediately and it took me a while to respond. Just for the record, Scott would absolutely never lay a hand on me in anger. He's too much of a man for that. I don't know what to say, Scott. I'll give up on Bill if you tell me what to do. I'm guessing you know his name. I still don't know how you found out, and it probably doesn't matter. I'm sure that in the end everything between us will end this way. It's good that you're willing to give it up if I force you. That's enough for me for now, but I won't force you to do it. It became more and more amazing. My heart jumped, but I was afraid to be too happy. I was mostly happy that Scott seemed willing to consider staying together. But the possibility of pursuing a relationship with Bill, it was more than I could have hoped for, even though I came to this conversation asking for exactly that. This is what's going to happen. You can accept it, or we can get a divorce, okay? Whatever, Scott, I promise you won't regret it. Make sure I don't regret it. First of all, I won't share you physically. It looks like I don't share you enough anyway, but I will not touch you after another man. As long as you continue to date him, I'll move downstairs. We were going to finish the basement anyway, so I'll just make a bedroom and a bathroom there. We're basically going to live as roommates until you decide you're done with him. You can invite him over, sure, but do not flaunt it in front of me or it'll be over for us. Does it suit you? The surprises continued. I was overwhelmed with happiness, but at the same time sad. What was the point of staying married if Scott was going to leave the bedroom? Perhaps he will eventually change his mind about this, I had to hope. Of course, you have every right to make any demands, Scott. I'm just so grateful that you're staying with me at all. I hope that eventually you decide you want to be intimate again. It's probably entirely up to you and how you make me feel, Lisa. Scott moved back the next day and immediately called a contractor to work on the basement. Our other 2 bedrooms had already been converted into an office and gym. I tried to get him to sleep in our bedroom, at least until the basement was finished, but he wouldn't do it. I tried to persuade him to let me sleep on the sofa, but he didn't agree to that either. This, of course, made me feel guilty, but maybe that was his goal too. I waited a few days and then called Bill again. What took you so long to call, baby? Why didn't you answer my calls? He knows, Bill. What? How could he know? Does it matter? He knows, and as you can tell, it really hurts him. Yeah, I guess. So is it over? You'd think he would, but no. He's fine with us continuing to see each other. Are you serious? What a weakling he is. I love it, Bill. Let me make one thing clear. Scott is no weakling, and the next time you call him, that will be the last time you see or talk to me, understand? Okay, baby, okay, calm down. I just want this to be clear from the beginning. Anyway, he's okay with us seeing each other, but while we're dating, he and I will essentially live as roommates. He's moving out of the bedroom and making himself a room downstairs. So what? You can still stay married and we can still see each other. You're right, but I still wonder why. And to be honest, I wonder why even call it marriage. We agreed to meet the next day at lunchtime, but at a local motel rather than at our home. For some reason, I didn't want to come here just yet. Interesting, now that I had permission, I wanted to be polite, at least at first. My thoughts continue to spin. Why did Scott react this way? It wasn't perfect, but it still seemed too good to be true. Scott and I saw each other in passing in the evenings, and he was polite. Friendly even, but I could be his male drinking buddy. There was no intimacy, physical or otherwise. I tried to start more personal conversations with him, but he politely changed the subject. I definitely started to feel like I was missing something. I met Bill the next day and the sex was just normal. I really can't pretend otherwise. I wish I could explain it or change it, but I couldn't. It was like all the exciting parts were gone now that Scott knew. Was it just deception that made it exciting before, or was it becoming clear that I needed love as much as I needed passion and passion alone was no longer enough, now that I didn't feel like I had love? As I continued to reflect, it gradually became clear to me that I had what I wanted. Now that I had it, it wasn't at all what I expected. Have you heard about the parent who locks their child in a closet and forces him to smoke a few cigarettes when he catches him smoking? I almost felt like something similar was happening to me. It just couldn't be what Scott thought, or could it? This would be a very sophisticated form of revenge. I wondered why he didn't want revenge, but maybe he was getting the ultimate revenge. From the way home, I stopped at the bank. I don't even remember why, but I decided to ask for a statement while I was there to make sure my checkbook balances were correct. And I was shocked to find that my balance was seriously reduced. I checked our savings account and found that half of the funds had also disappeared. I asked about this and was told that Scott withdrew half of each account a few days ago. Now I began to feel how serious this all was. I needed to talk to Scott when I got home. Scott, can we talk? I asked as soon as I walked through the front door and saw him sitting on the couch, watching his favorite college basketball team. On his arm was a puppet parrot with a large red head and a yellow beak, with a letters coop on its blue body. He sat, alternately concentrating and shouting at the TV. He eventually noticed I was there and paused the game. Don't we love divorce? What can I do for you, Lisa? Scott, why did you take half of our money from our bank accounts? Well, I was thinking that until we get back into a real marriage relationship, there's no point in dividing up the finances. Don't worry, there's a check at the end of the table for half the mortgage and utilities. That's not the point, Scott. It's just another distance between us. Scott fought for a moment and then spoke. Lisa, I don't understand. You wanted to be able to date other men, but you didn't want to lose anything in our relationship. Remember, I said I'd give him up if you wanted me to. It's not fair, Scott. Oh, so you didn't want to do it just because it was the right thing to do or out of respect for me. Only if it was the only way to stay together. Well, when you put it like that, oh my God, this didn't go the way I wanted at all. What should I do now? I had really opened Pandora's box and was starting to see it now. Lisa, let me help you with something here. I agreed to stay married because I wasn't 100% sure I was doing everything possible to communicate our needs and feelings to each other as the years went by. I didn't want to just leave, even though you cheated on me, us, without the confidence that I did more than I should have to keep our relationship alive and mutually satisfying. However, understand, despite everything, I may be too young for you. I'm sorry about that, but this is the only one I have. I may not turn you on anymore, but you have to understand that I still have pride and male ego, and I'm not going to tolerate disrespect. What do you think our friends and family will think of me if they find out that you even have a boyfriend, especially since I know? Let me talk about this and agree to just let you have him and have me at the same time. Sorry, I'm not interested in this. Let me clarify again. I didn't ask before, but how long have you been dating Bill? I wasn't dating Bill, just seeing Bill, met, seen, slept, whatever, how long. Scott was angry now. The layers of what I had done to him were just beginning to be revealed, and I was liking myself and my situation less and less with each passing hour. I started crying again, almost a year. A long silence followed. A year, yes, then again, there was no point in lying now, right? So here's what will happen. A year after you decide to stop dating Bill or anyone else, we can discuss whether we will be husband and wife again in more than just name. Now, if you don't mind, this game is important. I was now beginning to realize what a bitch I had been, and how much I had hurt the man I now knew I loved more than ever. I knew there was no point in begging him. Not only did I cheat on Scott, but I had the audacity, insensitivity, and selfishness to ask him to continue it, but also to keep all the things I loved most about our marriage at that time. God, I started to hate myself. It would be a very long year, but there was no doubt that I was going to wait until it was over. Probably another month or so wouldn't matter, right? Maybe 1-2 more times with Bill to enjoy the memories. You guessed it, I called Bill and met with him again the next day. I'm clearly the poster child for self-destructive behavior, and yet I did it. After we spent a couple more hours together, I wanted to take the steel wool and clean myself. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't fun. I felt dirty and cheap. When I left, I told him that I didn't want to see or hear from him anymore. To add insult to injury, he didn't seem to care much. I definitely didn't want him to be so insistent that it would become awkward to end our relationship, but I at least hoped that he would try to convince me to stay for the sake of my ego. The situation got better and better. Surely, Scott couldn't have planned for things to turn out this way, right? He couldn't have known how I would start to feel, and that Bill would end up leaving me, right? The next day, I told Scott that Bill and I had broken up. I don't know what I expected. I guess I hoped that he would be happy and hug me and forgive everything. I know. He simply marked it on the calendar, then turned to me. I'm glad to hear that you have made this decision. You must understand that I do not believe you, and I do not believe that you will not find someone else. You will have to prove to me that you have not dated other men within a year from this moment to get me back. I don't know how you'll do it, but it's not my problem. Scott turned to leave and then turned around. Oh yeah, just so it doesn't surprise you, I have a guest for dinner tomorrow night. So the final blow came. This was supposed to be the final blow, right? Haven't I learned my lesson yet? Just to add to my self-pity, let's sum it up. After I was caught, 1. I discovered that sex with my lover immediately became boring. 2. I began to really miss the emotional intimacy in my marriage. 3. Realized how important the non-sexual part of my physical relationship with my husband was and how it is now lost. 4. I hated myself because I felt guilty. 5. She suffered greatly because of the pain caused to Scott. 6. Now I could enjoy sudden and overwhelming jealousy. Besides, the last few weeks have been pretty good. As you may have guessed, her name was Lauren and she was absolutely stunning. She was about 5'3" tall. I would estimate her weight to be about 105 pounds. She had fantastic legs, red hair with a few freckles, and C-cup breasts. She worked in the next office building to Scott, and they crossed paths in the connecting garage and at the reception from time to time where they had brief conversations. She seemed to have a slight attraction to Scott for quite some time, but he didn't want to have anything more than friendly conversations with her. Apparently, he now felt free to do so. They had been dating for a couple of weeks and were clearly very comfortable together. She arrived and Scott cooked steaks, which she praised until she was blue in the face. I know this, of course, because I've been peeking through windows and doors the whole time she's been here. She left around 11 and I pretended to leave my room to get a glass of water. She's beautiful, I told Scott. Yes, she's beautiful, thanks for saying that. Why did you bring her here to give me a lesson? I don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. You've been dating someone for over 2 years behind my back. Are you really going to be jealous of me for dating someone now when we agreed we don't owe each other loyalty? I don't understand you. I guess I'll just, well, I'm really starting to see what a selfish bitch I've been. I want to ask no, I guess beg you to take me back. I mean, really take me back. We'll talk in a year and see, Lisa. I didn't think it was possible to shed more tears, but I found a way. To make a long story at least a little shorter, I held out for the next year. I took on an additional part-time job so that I could pay for the services of tracking me through cameras and recording devices. The irony was that I later learned that this was how I was caught. I sent reports directly to Scott. He never commented on them. He continued to act friendly towards me, but his wall never came down. He continued to date Lauren, and although I tried not to interfere with their time together after that first evening, I assumed they were very serious about each other. It was the longest and definitely one of the most painful years of my life. I oscillated between self-pity because of how much this hurt me and self-loathing because I knew how much I had hurt Scott and deserved everything that was happening to me. Scott was never overtly angry or made any comments that might imply that it was all about revenge. He probably just felt that he needed this time to regain his lost dignity. At the end of my year of cleansing, I approached Scott. Scott, can we talk? Of course, Lisa. What happened? Well, you may not remember, but it's been a year. Yeah, I thought about that too. So can we discuss the possibility of being husband and wife again? I think you'll agree that I've done everything you asked. In fact, and you can assume that, but I don't want to leave it up to chance. So I want you to know that I spent most of the last year wondering what caused my actions. I wish I had an answer that would show me in a better light, but it was just selfishness on my part. I wanted everything we had together, but I also wanted to add the excitement of something secret on the side. It really had nothing to do with Bill as a person, and this was not due to the fact that we were missing something. I told myself at the beginning that if you don't find out, then I won't hurt you. Now that I've had time to step back and think about it without emotion, I'm ashamed of myself. I mean, I was ashamed then, of course, but obviously not enough to stop. I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever you want to make things right between us. I am pleased and impressed by your thoughts and understanding, if it is truly sincere, of course. However, I have to tell you that Lauren and I have decided to get married. I fell in love with her, and while I'm not saying this to hurt your feelings, sex with her is much better than sex with you ever was. And honestly, and I think she's just a better fit for me sexually, as well as emotionally, mentally, and intellectually. Oh, and she plays golf. I'm really sorry to hurt you, but now I really need to move forward and get a divorce. Scott paused for a moment and looked at me, then turned and walked away. I collapsed on the floor and sobbed the remaining tears from my heart. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.